Welcome back to the Bar Society podcast. Today I will be joined by a very special guest, Lady Dorrian, Lord Justice Clerk of Scotland. Lady Dorrian, who is a University of Aberdeen alumni, will talk about her journey to the bar and provide insights into her career. We will also talk about criminal law and discuss the future of the legal system. We hope you enjoy today's episode. Hi, good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm good, you?
Good, yeah, I'm fine, thanks, yeah. Tell me about the podcast.
The aim of our podcast is to help with our society's goal of demystifying the route to the English and Scottish bar and promote different areas of specialisms. With our new series After Aberdeen, we interview alumni of our university to provide students with useful insights and tips.
Good, excellent. Well, very happy to participate then.
I'll get started then with the first question.
Okay.
Why did you decide to study law?
Well, I thought it was a subject I would enjoy and also that I might be quite good at. Given the kind of things I was, good at school. I was also always fascinated by tales of the great lawyers of the past, Marshall Hall and all that. And I devoured books about them. I think you probably find that's the case of a lot of people who go to the bar. A particular influence on me was the career of Rose Heilbron, who was a QC in England in the middle of the last century. And she was one of the first women to achieve eminence in the sphere of criminal law. So that was a big influence.
Thank you. Could you please tell us about your journey to the bar after university?
Sure. Well, it was an entirely traditional route. In those days, you did an apprenticeship, not a traineeship. You didn't do the diploma. So I did a 2-year apprenticeship with a mixed firm in Edinburgh, followed by a post-qualifying year, which is the sort of thing you did in those days when you were qualifying to be a solicitor, which I did for a year before going to the bar. I did that with a different firm. I was meant to be a court of session assistant there, instructing counsel, helping prepare cases. But the firm did a lot of criminal work. And so I found myself doing as much, if not more, in the criminal field and conducting trials, even jury trials, tendering pleas, preparing cases. And so that was a very valuable experience that year. And then after that year, I started deviling, and then I was called to the bar at the end of that period.
Thank you. Did you know you wanted to be an advocate? If so, what inspired you to pursue a career at the bar?
Yes, I think always I think I decided when I was about 13. And really the inspiration came from the books I was talking about earlier. And also I think from certain television programs, forensic-based television programs. There was one called The Expert with an actor called Marius Goring playing a forensic scientist. And that was really gripping and interesting and made me interested in that kind of side of legal things. But the main one was a program called Justice. And the principal character in that was a female barrister making her way in what was then a very male-dominated world. And I just loved it. It was based on the career of Rose Heilbron, the QC I was talking about earlier, who was the great inspiration for me when I was growing up. So yeah, pretty well always I decided that's what I wanted to do.
Thank you. Was specialising in criminal law something you planned? Did you consider any other areas of law?
No, I didn't have any plan for working in any given field when I started out. I was happy to do a mixture of work. And I was lucky, I think, that I managed to do both civil and criminal work throughout my career, which I think is much more difficult to manage these days. I did both as a junior, and I also did both as a senior, although in fairness, I did more civil as a senior than I did criminal. But then obviously when I became a judge, I was back to doing a lot of criminal stuff. And as the Lord Justice Clerk, I have delegated responsibility from the Lord President for the running of the criminal courts. So no, there's never been a grand plan.
Okay. What would you say are some of the advantages of going to practice into criminal law? What sets it apart from other areas of practice?
Well, the main advantage, I think, and this is what I was really talking about when I was describing the experience I had during my post-qualifying year with the firm that did a lot of criminal work. The major advantage of going into criminal practice is it gives you unrivaled experience in the courtroom compared to your peers who go into other areas of court work. In criminal practice, you'll be on your feet from very early on. You'll have responsibility for your own cases from a fairly early stage, and you'll be gaining an experience that's completely invaluable. I would say it's almost impossible to get that kind of real, regular experience in court anywhere else. And if you look at people who have come to the bar, those who are practicing in the criminal field get much more court exposure from much earlier on than they do in the civil field.
That's very interesting. Thank you. What are some of the challenges you face practicing criminal law, and how did you overcome them?
Well, when I started in the criminal law as a solicitor in the Sheriff Court, there were very few women on the defence side. I actually started at the same time as another female defence solicitor, and some of the sheriffs used to mix us up, even though we didn't look a bit alike, but we got mistaken for one another just because we were two women working in the defence bar. When I went to the bar, again, there were hardly any women at the defence bar at that time. That was 1981 when I was called. And there had never been a female advocate depute. So I suppose those of us who were doing that work were a bit of a novelty, I suppose. I was the first woman to be appointed as an advocate depute to prosecute in the High Court. That was in 1988. And that felt a bit of a landmark at the time. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Many students worry about work-life balance and job security at the bar. Could you talk about how you navigated these issues, or if you experienced these worries?
Yes, well, of course, I mean, times change and we have to change with them. And I was very fortunate because my boss in the firm where I was an assistant gave me a bonus when I left to start deviling. And that certainly helped me through the first months of deviling. But I think things are actually a bit better now than they were. The faculty has a number of scholarships available, designed, we've got 4 different scholarship programs, I think, and they're designed to ensure that lack of means does not prevent someone of skill and talent from going to the bar. They also operate, which was entirely different from my day, a fair distribution policy. So what happens is that sometimes work will be sent directly to a named advocate. Sometimes it will go to a clerk to find someone. Sometimes it will go to the named advocate who is unable to do it, and then the clerk has to distribute it. And the faculty have a policy that whenever it occurs that the work has to be distributed by the clerk, the allocation has to be done fairly and without discrimination. And that's actually something very new compared to when I was in practice, where it was probably done unfairly and with discrimination, and where I think there was undoubtedly favoritism towards men and favoritism towards certain individuals probably as well. So that's a step forward that can only be helpful especially for the junior bar and those establishing themselves. There's a junior bar association now, or a junior bar group within the faculty, and that's designed to offer support and developmental opportunities for junior advocates. I think it's up to 5 years call maybe, and to be a platform for their voices to be heard. So whilst there are, of course, the kind of challenges that you mention, they are perhaps mitigated in a way by these steps that have been taken.
Yeah, I think many students will feel very confident hearing about these many initiatives. Do you think it's important for young people to go into the practice of criminal law? If so, why?
Well, the answer to that question is definitely yes. I mean, I know we're talking about the bar largely because that's the interest of your group, but I'm glad that you've asked this question in a wider sense about criminal legal practice. because I'm really keen to see more young people entering this aspect of practice in both branches of the legal profession, both the bar and the solicitor branch. And, you know, practice of the criminal law it's not only enthralling, engaging and exacting, and it's all of those, but it's of the utmost importance to the administration of justice and to society as a whole. You know, it's vital to society as a whole that the rule of law is maintained, that the guilty receive a fair trial, that the innocent are protected, and that's meat and drink to the criminal part of the profession. Those working in this field operate in a highly charged atmosphere, doing work which is enormously valuable, very challenging, and greatly rewarding. It's a busy area of practice. There doesn't seem to be any shortage of work. And I think when you look at the importance of it, that's of course the importance of it to society as a whole, to the rule of law, to maintaining a fair society, and to helping make sure that the criminal law operates as it should, with fairness. But there is more to it than that, because the legal systems within the UK all have a high reputation internationally. London, as you know, is a centre of litigation from all over the world, and Edinburgh is a significant commercial and financial centre, as of course London is a major financial centre. But this only happens because there is a trusted legal system in operation across the board. And a very significant part of what allows the system as a whole to receive that trust is the work done in the criminal courts up and down the country. You know, you can't divorce that, the effect of that, and the maintenance of standards and integrity in the criminal courts from the benefits to the system as a whole.
Thank you so much. As Lord Justice Clerk, you have been involved in many changes in the criminal justice system, such as the new guidelines for sentencing younger people. Can people be involved in such changes throughout their career at the bar?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are many opportunities for people to be involved in helping promote law reform. So, for example, the Scottish Sentencing Council consults publicly on all of its guidelines. We receive responses from the Faculty of Advocates, from the Law Society, and these are usually the work of a committee from within the relevant branch of the profession, and there will certainly be opportunities for young people working in this area to be on such committees. In addition, there are bodies such as the Criminal Bar Group of the Faculty of Advocates, Criminal Bar Association, the Junior Bar Committee that I just mentioned, in the Law Society, there's the Scottish Young Lawyers Association, and they may have views to present. Either individual lawyers may submit their views or through these committees. And if the young person gets involved in those committees, then they can definitely be involved in law reform. In other areas that I've been involved in, not just for the Sentencing Council, but in all the areas of reform that I've been involved in, and there have been quite a number, they've been the product of collaboration with people working across the criminal justice sector, including individual solicitors and advocates. So I think the answer to that is a resounding yes. If they are interested in that, there will be scope. Yeah.
I think it's also important that young people feel they can be involved in such changes. I think it would encourage a lot of people to join the profession. What do you think the future of criminal law will be? What kind of reforms do you think will take place or are needed?
Well, this question needs a crystal ball, really, because it's very difficult to predict. It will be obvious from what I've been saying, Jakub, that I think we need to do more to encourage young people into criminal practice. And how we do that, I think, will depend on really getting to the bottom of what prevents them from coming into criminal practice. I think that's going to involve a fair amount of work by the Law Society, by the faculty, as well as the universities, who have a role to play in this. But there has been a fall off in young people coming into criminal practice, and we really need to address that. I know that the faculty and the Law Society are already trying to do that, but I really do think we need to identify what it is that's deterring people who might have started university with a firm intention of becoming a criminal lawyer, and take steps to remedy that, to try to address what concerns they have, to find out what their concerns are, see if there are ways we can manage those. I think it's a difficult issue.
Do you think young people bring a diversity of views to criminal law? Is that something that could maybe help, the future of the legal system?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's one of the real values of having young people coming into the profession, and in particular into criminal practice, but also into other areas of practice, particularly things to do with judicial review, human rights, and so on. It's inevitable that age brings a different perspective, and that youth has a different perspective from age. It may be on a sliding scale. They may have a similar perspective but see it through a different prism. I think that probably all lawyers at my stage will remember when they were young lawyers being involved in, a consultation or discussion of a case with a senior, where the young person raised an issue that the senior hadn't thought of and perhaps had overlooked or had given a different importance to, and which actually was worth addressing. So unquestionably, there is an element of perspective and diversity that is brought with that. And of course, the young population of Scotland is much more diverse than the older population of Scotland. And that can only bring a good thing to the practice of the law.
Do you have any advice you could give to students who are wanting to pursue a career at the bar?
Well, it's difficult to give advice in this context in a generic way. I think it's impossible, really, because it's not like one size fits all. The right advice depends on the individual and the stage of their development. And I always think there's a risk that advice given in this context sounds condescending or smug. And anyway, what worked for me as a young lawyer 40 years ago won't necessarily be what works for young people now. The landscape's changed, the profession's changed. We've all, gone through a period of a rapid change, particularly in the last 10 years. So I find it quite difficult to answer that question. I think the only advice I would give is this: remember, we were all young lawyers once, with no idea where we might end up. Lord Reid and Lord Hodge, President and Vice President of the UK Supreme Court, young lawyers once. Lord Carloway, Lord President of the Court of Session, a young lawyer once. Myself, believe it or not, a young lawyer once. Amidst you and your peers will be the future President of the Court of Session, possibly the future President of the UK Supreme Court, the future Lord Justice Clerk. Believe that to be true.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. Also, what do you think are some characteristics that you think make a good advocate?
Well, it helps to be reasonably articulate, obviously, to have an inquiring mind and an analytical mind, obviously. To be able to work under pressure, I think, is pretty important. To have a degree of moral courage, or to be able to exercise that when you have to. But the quality probably required above all is independence of thought. The ability to bring an objective, dispassionate, and fair mind to any problem, free from external influences, and despite what the client might want to hear. I think that independence is really the most important quality that any lawyer can have.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to meet you, and I think it'll be a very informative podcast for students. Thank
Good.
you so much.
Well, I hope I hope this answered some concerns that people have, and I'm very happy to have been involved and to answer your questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, you too. Bye, Jakub. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening. Please follow us on Instagram at BarSocABDN and on Facebook at Bar Society Aberdeen to stay up to date on upcoming episodes of our podcast.